Okay, sedative hypnotics. So basically, these are the drugs. Major categories: benzodiazepines, barbiturates, and miscellaneous. First, I think so. We should definitely understand what's the difference between a sedative and hypnotic drug. So, a sedative drug, it reduces anxiety and exert calming effect. So it's also called anxiolytic. And hypnotic drug basically produces drowsiness and it encourages sleep. So hypnotics, they induce state of sleep. Sedatives, they are anxiolytics. And simply increasing the dose of a drug, some of these drugs can actually produce sedative effects to hypnotic. So if you look at this graph, you can see that this x-axis you have the increasing dose. If you increase dose here, and y-axis you have the extent of CNS depression. So this is low CNS depression, and then this is super high CNS depression. So look at drug A, the red line. So as you increase the dose, there is dose-dependent decreasing CNS activity or increasing CNS effect. Saying that if you increase the dose at such a high dose, it can actually lead to coma and usually death. How about this drug with a drug B? You increase dose, you see sedation, and then hypnosis, and eventually you just basically the effect flats out, saying that these drugs are much safer than these drugs. So, for example, an example of drug A is going to be barbiturates or alcohol. Drug B is an example. In this case, this could be benzodiazepines, so they're much safer. We'll discuss in a second. So let's talk about barbiturates first. So these were once extensively used, but they are largely replaced by much safer benzodiazepines because this is barbiturates and this is benzodiazepine. Okay, so how these barbiturates work? So let's look at the GABA receptor first. So we have this GABA receptor. This is this membrane, biological membrane. This receptor is sitting here. And once this receptor is open or is activated by its ligand GABA, which is binding here, it opens the right channel. So this is the normal thing. So what barbiturates do, they actually bind here. You see this binding site. The barbiturates bind here, and what they do, they basically potentiate GABA-induced right-one by prolonging period of channel. How basically these are positive allosteric modulators. So when it's positive means they increase, allosteric means they bind a different site than GABA and then increase the right channel. So that's basically how they work. And if you give in high concentration, they can actually work like as a GABA mimetic. So they actually don't need GABA, they will just activate the channel itself. And in addition to that, they also will do what? They also block AMPA receptor. Remember, the AMPA receptor was basically where glutamate is also binding. So see that at lower concentration, it basically increase chloride conductance, and higher concentration they act like GABA, and they also depress the excitatory neurotransmission by blocking AMPA receptor. So there are multiple effects that barbiturates are producing, and that could explain why these drugs produce more pronounced CNS depressions. That's the reason they are no longer used as sedative hypnotics. We have better drugs like benzodiazepines. So, but still, you might see a case of arbitrary poisoning, and how do you manage that? So first you have to see what the patient will look like in case of arbitrary poisoning. So a patient would be in coma because it's just CNS depression is the end stage of that. And then the breathing is going to be slow or very shallow. Blood pressure will fall, pulmonary complication like the lungs will collapse, which is what this means basically. So you see that there is a high degree of CNS depression. You see, if you look at this graph that we just saw, so you have barbiturates poisoning means you have super high dose, and that's what you see. All these heightened CNS effects. So how do you manage? Well, we don't have any antidote, so you simply have to manage the vital signs. So you have general supporting measures. Make sure that in case if you have a patient who has this lung collapse, so you provide mechanical ventilation. And if patient renal and cardio functions are okay, you can try giving diuretics, so for forcing this blood out of the body. So so these are options basically. We don't have any antidote for that. So what are the uses? Basically, as I told you, they have been largely replaced by benzodiazepines, which are very much safer. But let's just look at how they impact sleep. What they do, they increase the total sleep time and decrease sleep latency. So basically, it's saying that these will put you in sleep quickly and put you in sleep for a longer period of time. But what happens basically, the tolerance develops very quickly following the repeated use, and then if you discontinue these drugs, you'll have rebound increase in sleep parameters. So, and then because since they because of these properties, people because of these antidepressant properties, people abuse this drug, and then it can also cause physical and psychological dependence. Okay. And then we have this barbiturates adverse effects, so all contraindication interactions. So these drugs are absolutely contraindicated in patients with this drug, porphyria or porphyria variegated. So what this disease is a genetic disease in which you have more of porphyrin, lot more porphyrin. So what porphyrin is, it's a component of your blood. So the hemoglobin is a part of that heme part. And then, so patient would have a lot of that basically. So if the patient already has this, and then this drug like barbiturates, they increase porphyrin synthesis, then you don't. This is basically going to be causing toxicity. So that's the reason these drugs are contraindicated in patients with this disease. And then if you combine barbiturates with other CNS depressants, for example, alcohol, it can have severe depression. Why? Because both of the drugs are causing dose-dependent decrease for in the CNS function. Okay, so now we're going to talk about benzodiazepines, which are a little much safer drugs. So same receptor that we just discussed. So barbiturates were binding here, benzodiazepines bind right here. So they bind to these in between alpha and gamma subunits. So these are different subunits of the GABA receptors. And don't worry about this that's a second, but all you have to understand and memorize is that this drug, which is benzodiazepine, is binding to GABA receptor on a place which is not where the GABA binds. So it's an allosteric modulator. And then it increases chloride opening, so saying that these are a positive allosteric modulator. It's important to know that how they work. They increase the affinity of GABA for GABA receptors, so that they increase the affinity for this drug to the receptor, so that the receptor can be activated. Okay, so it's very, very important that you understand this. So benzodiazepine increase the channel frequency on opening only in the presence of GABA. So barbiturates were doing what? In higher concentration, they were just simply opening the channel. But with benzodiazepines, if the GABA is not there, they're not going to work. So they need GABA in order to open the channel. So saying that, if that's the case, it doesn't matter how much benzodiazepine you put in, basically if the GABA is not there, it's not going to work. So that could probably explain why you have a very remarkable safety profile for benzodiazepines, because the effects of this is depending on the release of GABA. And in the absence of GABA, benzodiazepines don't work. So these are the major differences, that if we look at benzodiazepines versus barbiturates. So, the barbiturates and benzodiazepines, they both are binding at separate sites than the GABA binds. So they're both allosteric site. So they both positively modulate the receptor. So that's kind of a similarity. But what's the contrast of that is that Barbiturates in high concentration can directly open the channel, but benzodiazepines, it doesn't matter. They still need GABA to open the channel. So if you see that, if you give equally effective doses of concentration of GABA, maximum effective concentration of barbiturate produces greater enhancement of your response than benzodiazepines. So what this is saying is that if equally effective concentration of GABA is given, which drug is producing more effect? Barbiturates or benzodiazepines? Which one? The barbiturates are producing great effect because they can directly open the channel. They don't need GABA, right? Whereas benzodiazepines are producing effect because they need GABA. Okay, so then the therapeutic uses. Make sure that you understand all these things. It's critical. So benzodiazepine can be used for anxiety disorders, sleep disorders, sedation and amnesia, control of sedative hypnotic ethanol withdrawal, which we'll see in the next few chapters, as an anticonvulsant, muscle relaxant, and treatment of muscle spasm. Especially, let's focus on these two, actually three of these. It's very critical because of this chapter. So these drugs are used for management of anxiety attacks and panic attacks. So as I told in the class, what's panic attack? It's a very severe anxiety. That something is going to happen, and you have increased heart rate, sweating and all this stuff. So it's a kind of a panic attack. Also used for long-term treatment of generalized anxiety disorder. So what is generalized anxiety disorder? It's basically excessive worry for everything. For example, you just get out of home and you're so much worried that you're gonna hit somebody, or you have an accident or whatever, basically. So it's just unnecessary worry for everything. And so alprazolam is a preferred drug for panic disorder and agoraphobia, which fears space. And then in terms of sleep disorders, what these drugs do, they decrease time to fall asleep and increase stage 2 of non-REM sleep. So we'll discuss what is the non-REM sleep in a second, but all you have to remember here is that they will put you in sleep quickly, and they will increase the total sleep duration. So, and then we have these longer acting, intermediate acting, and short acting benzodiazepines, which based on their duration of action, they might have different use. For example, this drug, which is midazolam, it's a very short acting drug. So it could be used in sedation and amnesia before medical surgical procedure. Like this not only will sedate the patient, but also will have amnestic effect. Means amnesia is loss of memory, but here is saying the patient will not remember what happened during the surgery. So the short-acting drugs could be used for those. Whereas you want to use the intermediate-acting drug for sleep disorders. And then some of these benzodiazepines, they are also used for withdrawal and ethanol dependence. So we'll see this in the next few chapters. Okay, and then tolerance and dependence. So we discussed this, I think so, in opioids, what tolerance and dependence is. Tolerance, basically, you need more to produce the same effect, and then it depends. So for benzodiazepines, it develops for sedatives, but for less anxiety. But in terms of anxiolytic effect, tolerance develop very, very less. And these drugs are cross-tolerant to ethanol. So cross-tolerant to ethanol means, remember, I told what cross-tolerance is, that if two drugs are working through the same mechanism, the other drug is going to be, patient is going to be tolerant to other drug as well. For example, ethanol and benzodiazepine, they both are targeting GABA receptors, right? So if the patient is taking tough alcohol and then he takes like benzodiazepines for sleep disorder, the dose that is good for general population might not be good for that patient because he is cross tolerant to that drug because of ethanol. Dependence, patient can have physiological dependence if these drugs are used for a long period of time. So what is physiological dependence is that the patient body needs the drug. Why? Because if you stop the drug, your patient will experience withdrawal symptoms. Psychological dependence means the compulsive use, means patient need the drug. So it's kind of psychological dependence as a synonymous term with addiction. So pharmacokinetic differences of pharmacokinetics of these drugs, benzodiazepines, they all cross placenta during pregnancy. There is a chance it can depress neonatal vital signs, so this must be considered there. Most of these drugs have active metabolites, so that may contribute to the longer half-life of these drugs. And then clorazepate is a prodrug, which is converted to nordiazepam. And then for long-acting drugs like diazepam and flurazepam, active metabolites can actually lead to excessive sedation. So these parameters must be considered for what these drugs can be used for. So I think so in the class we discussed that, if you look at the same thing with the pharmacokinetic parameters, if you look at this in table form, like these are the drugs, this is the half-life, and the comments. So if you look at these drugs like alprazolam, 12 to 15 hours, look at clorazepate, 50 to 100 hours, flurazepam, 100 hours, then you have lorazepam, 20 hours, look at that, triazolam, so 2-3 hours. So we have other drugs called Z drugs, which are actually not benzodiazepine, like Z drugs, everything is just ZZ, and then there's nothing drugs under here, this drug. So look at that, 6, 1.5, 1 hour. So these are short-acting drugs. These are not benzodiazepines, but they work similar to benzodiazepine in terms of their mechanism of action. So no need to memorize everything here because it's just not, but you have to definitely understand what is short-acting, which drugs are short-acting, what is intermediate acting, and long-acting. So if you can classify the short-acting like 2 to 6 hours, and then intermediate 6 to 24 hours, long-acting 25 to 75 hours, and as long as you have a few examples of these drugs, and try to put more if you want from this table, but make sure that you remember which is short-acting, long-acting, and intermediate acting. And look at that, this drug called Z drugs. I just want to pay attention. I just want you guys to pay attention on that. You see Z drugs, zolpidem, it does not have any active metabolites. You see that? That's beautiful because most of the benzodiazepines have active metabolites, like lorazepam and oxazepam. They don't have those. So in case, we just discussed that benzodiazepines are probably the safest one, or safer one, than barbiturates. But still, in case if there is no benzodiazepines overdose, you want to use this drug called flumazenate, which is an antagonist at benzodiazepine receptor. And if this drug is given to a patient who has been chronically treated with drug, it may precipitate withdrawal because it's basically kicking off the drug from the receptor, creating a state that patient body doesn't have any drug on board. So next we have the drug called Ranoltine, and then so all these drugs that benzodiazepines and barbiturates we looked at, they are just general CNS depressants, right? They just depress the CNS. These drugs are beautiful, look at that. So how these drugs are working, they are agonists at melatonin receptors in your suprachiasmatic nucleus of brain. So what this part of the brain is doing, remember, you probably have heard about that we have a biological clock, similar to the clock that we have in your brain. Our brain a biological clock that regulates multiple functions, right? So basically, in the morning you get up and you have energy, you want to go to work or go to classroom or something, and in the night you get drowsy, you want to take a sleep, quick nap, or you sleep for 8 hours if you're very lucky. So basically, so this is basically saying that this part of the brain regulates this biological clock, or is implicated in regulating the biological clock. And how it is working is that in the night there is heightened activity of melatonin receptor, and then in the day it goes down. So saying that this heightened activity or increased activity of these receptors producing sleep, how about using an agonist on this receptor? So these drugs are agonists on these receptors, and thereby they are producing sleep. They don't have direct effect on GABA transmission. Look at that. This is beautiful. So that the GABA transmission is not required as must for inducing sleep, because if you modulate this receptor, you can still induce sleep. And then how these drugs do, they reduce the latency to sleep with no effect on sleep architecture or rebound insomnia. So look at that. This is beautiful because remember benzodiazepines were changing some part of non-REM sleep, right? But these drugs don't do that. They don't change sleep architectures. Don't worry about this. We're gonna see in a second in the last few slides. So then we have these new drugs called Z drugs, where they do this exactly very similar mechanism of action compared to benzodiazepines. They do bind to another side, separate side than GABA on the GABA receptor. So that Z drugs. So they bind here and then block, and then basically they activate this GABA channel. And then compared to benzodiazepines, they are less effective ones as anticonvulsant or muscle relaxant. So remember, benzodiazepines have multiple effects like hypnosis, sedation, muscle relaxant, and anticonvulsant. These drugs, they don't have anticonvulsant and muscle relaxant effects. They have sleep-inducing effect. And when these drugs were introduced into the market, these were labeled as they can, if people don't abuse these drugs, but now we know that that's not true. People still abuse these drugs too. And then we have chlorohydrate. So what this drug is basically, this drug is used for sedative purposes to relieve anxiety and do sleep before surgery. And then how this drug is working, basically, this drug is rapidly reduced to this active compound called trichloroethanol, and then this drug basically activates GABA receptor. So saying that this drug is activating GABA receptor just to induce general sleep depression, and could be used to relieve anxiety and induce sleep before surgery. Okay, and then we have some miscellaneous drugs like antidepressant and buspirone. So remember, I just explained that there is a risk for that the patient might abuse these drugs, right? So in case if you have that kind of concern for a patient, these drugs can be used. So these drugs are first-line agent for patients concerned of addiction or dependence. But what is problem, or I might say problem, but the limitation of these antidepressant is all these drugs like that. We're going to discuss all these things next chapter. Don't worry about this. For this chapter, just treat that everything as an antidepressant. So if you have to give antidepressant, you still want to prescribe this along with a low dose of benzodiazepines for first weeks of treatment. Why? Because we all know that the antidepressants, they don't work like aha. It takes weeks to get the effect. So during that time, you definitely want to have something that can relieve at least or produce some effect. So that's the reason we have this low dose benzodiazepine during the first week of treatment. So another newer drug that we have is basically this suvorexant. So this drug is an inhibitor of orexin receptor. So what orexin receptor is doing basically, this is promoting wakefulness. So this orexin is a neuropeptide and actually activates the receptors and produce wakefulness. So this is activating you or producing wakefulness. If you block it, what will happen? It will produce sleep. So that's how these drugs are working. This drug is working, and this is recently approved by FDA. And then how these drugs work? It decreases sleep onset latency. Basically, it will put you in sleep very quickly. But the adverse effect for this drug is that next day somnolence. So that's you have to consider in case some patient has some special requirement. For example, if somebody's job is driving, and then they still have issue with the sleep, and they take this drug, and next day they have revive. And like any of these drugs in benzodiazepines, if they're longer acting or producing some sort of drowsiness on the next day, well, that's going to be detrimental for that patient. So you have to consider all these things before giving a drug to a particular patient. Okay, so now we know all the drugs. How we going to treat sleep disorder? So first we need to know what's the natural state of what is sleep. I mean, we all know what sleep is. You can read this, but we want to talk about sleep architectures. We just discussed whether NREM, REM sleep. What is that? So normal sleep, we have 5 phases. So stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then REM sleep, and then we go back again here, and then we go back again, go back again. So this is how it's working. So this stage 1, 2, 3, 4 is called as non-REM sleep. If this is a REM sleep, this is a non-REM sleep. Okay. And then this is where you spend most of your time when you're asleep. Like 80% time you're in these stages. Why we have this REM sleep, as the name tells you, rapid eye movement. So you have this rapid eye movement. Heart rate goes up. Brain activity goes up during this time. Why we go through that? Because this is critical. This is a time. This is this phase when you have dreams, basically. So dream state, and then the physiological, biological significance of that is it has a lot of implications in the memory reconsolidation. For example, whatever you learn or know during the day, this is the time when the memories are created. So it is an important physiological function. So if somebody has some disorder with sleep, most of the time if you can take care of the diet and exercise, basically, and avoid anything stimulant like tea or coffee before sleeping, it works. But for some people, you need some drugs. Like in that case, what kind of drug you want? So the drug should provide rapid onset. It should basically put you to sleep quickly. It should have sufficient duration, means it should put you in sleep for a good amount of time, and then minimum hangover means the next day you shouldn't feel drowsiness or dysphoria or depression, anything on the next day. So nothing it should not have any after effects or so. So based on whatever we just learned, let's look at what we learned and how we can see which drug can fulfill these criteria. So, as I told you that benzodiazepines, they cause a dose-dependent decrease in both REM and slow wave sleep. So saying that, they will put you in sleep, but they actually change sleep architectures, right? Although lesser extent than barbiturates. That's what we know, right? Whereas look at that, the newer hypnotics like Z drugs, they don't change sleep pattern, but they still are as good as benzodiazepine. They will put you in sleep quickly, but they don't change sleep architectures. Okay. Abrupt discontinuation of many drugs can lead to rebound insomnia, so should not be discontinued abruptly. And then this is another important thing, that daytime sedation is more common with benzodiazepines with slower rate, or those drugs which have active metabolites. So you want to consider those drugs before you give this to a patient. Okay. Another thing which is critical is that these Z drugs, they have efficacy similar to these benzodiazepines in sleep. So they are as good as benzodiazepines to manage sleep disorder. But what are the favorable features of using a Z drug? These are the newer hypnotics. That's the new class of drug. They are rapid onset activity, right? Modest day after psychomotor depression and TMS effect. So look at that. What are the desirable features of a hypnotic drug? It should be rapid onset. That's what they have. It should not induce. It should not interfere with the sleep architectures. These Z drugs, all these Z drugs, they don't change sleep architectures, at least at low doses. And plus, they don't have that greater or that much effect on the following day, basically. So that's what you have to consider. Which drug you want to give to one particular patient. Um, so that's basically it for the Sedative hypnotics. So I hope so that helps.